Hi everybody, it's Marcus here at Healing with Marcus. We are on episode 7 of Breaking Free from the Matrix, and today our topic is extraterrestrial forces involved in the creation of us. And if we start to look at the bigger picture of our society, of our lives, and how, if we can look at that there is a actual energy behind the Matrix, that the Matrix is being fueled or being sustained by fear. And the fear is keeping everybody in place. And you can look at it as the fear you carry inside of you, the fear of judgment, the fear of missing out on money, fear of missing out on paying your bills, fear of not being a part of all of society. All of that fear, or not having the right opinions, right? Not having the politically correct opinions. All of those fears are keeping us in line. And it, like we have talked about before, it starts early. It starts already in school when we are little, when we are having to learn the exact, and of course, nothing wrong with learning things, nothing wrong with studying, with taking in information, with growing in our awareness and our consciousness and our knowing, our base of knowing. It's great to have a broad base of understanding. But when it's taught to you in this manner that it's taught in our schools, where it's, if you don't do right by the teacher, you're not getting good grades. You're not going to be a part of society. If you haven't gone through all the years of school, you are not as good of a human. All of that, we can easily see that it's based in fear. We can see that the whole energy system that we're living in has a lot of fear going on. Now, looking deeper at that, then, we also see that breaking free from the Matrix requires you to step out of that framework, requires you to start to understand and see life in a different manner. If you can step out, like for example, one of the things that were big for me was going out into nature. I took hikes. This is about 13, 14 years ago. I started hiking much more, and I spent much more time in the backcountry when I was living up in the mountains in Mammoth. And when I did, I had all these visions of what life was like out there. And I also, when you stay out a few days, it's like you're stepping out of a bubble. It's like stepping out of the bubble of our society. And when you're out there, you realize that what's important is to be able to eat. What's important is to, like at that point, I was still eating animal products, so I would be fishing and stuff. And what was important was to have my fishing gear. It was important to have my little cook thing so I could cook. It was not important what phone bill was due. It was not important what bills or checks were coming in or going. It had no relevance on reality. The reality that was out there in nature doesn't go by the same rules that we do here in our human society. And this is part of, in my experience, part of my awakening out of the Matrix, which was understanding that there's a system in place in humanity that is created. Now, nowadays I have had more insights and more learnings, right? So now I understand that the way, from my perspective, this looks like it's not only from our own planet, the forces that are in charge of keeping that fear, that system of fear in place. They're not only terrestrial, they're not only from Earth. That's what it looks like to me. And I've had experiences in my journeys where that has been shown to me. So if we come back to the idea that we've been created by extraterrestrial forces, which there are a lot of signs pointing in that direction. If you look at the old Sumerian myths or Native American myths or any one of the older myths in our world, they both talk about giants, they talk about gods coming down from the heavens. In a lot of the old Hindu writings, they talk about how the gods came down from the heavens in a cloud of smoke with thunder, with a sound of thunder came, and then the booming voices came and they spoke to them. And that is sort of like even in the Jewish religion of Moses, he's heard a burning bush talk to him, right? So if we take out the myth element and if we look at, okay, so if we as a humankind, if we were to say, if we sat next to a chimpanzee, and the chimpanzee would look at us and it would think to itself, oh, there's a human, I've seen them around. And then we flick our fingers, we know that we have a lighter in our hand, but suddenly there's fire in our hand. For the chimpanzee, it's going to look like magic. For the chimpanzee, it's going to look like, holy moly, they must be gods. They can create fire with their hands. Or even if we create fire in other ways, with sticks and all that stuff, it most likely would look miraculous to other beings on our planet. So if we saw another being come to us, and they would be able to talk in, let's say, walkie-talkies, or loudspeaker systems, or they spoke to each other over distances, kind of how we do nowadays with cell phones. But this is 2,000 years ago, this is 4,000 years ago, this is 6,000 years ago. If those people saw beings communicate to each other without, like through a device, it may have looked like they were gods. If this is, and you can believe this or not, this is just my observation, right? But what if, instead of being myth about the gods coming down from the heavens, what if those are actual stories? Because if we do look at the Egyptian writings in the pyramids, some pyramids have no writings, but some of them do have a lot of writings. Or if you look at a lot of the Sumerian myths, or you look at the Indian myths, or you look at the South American myths, they do speak about gods coming from the heavens. And their depictions of this are that of, it looks sort of human, but they look like they're wearing big suits. And they are sitting in these capsules that could easily be construed to be either eggs or actual crafts, yes? So, and if you then start to look at that, you're like, oh, what if what they wrote down was their reality, was their experience of reality? See, in the modern view of the world, and this might be a part of how the Matrix has evolved and gotten stronger as well, is we in our modern day society, we are so proud over our accomplishments, our technological advancements, that we think we are such a higher standing race or place, that we are much more intelligent than they were even 200 years ago, or not to mention 2,000 years ago. That when they speak about Jesus carrying out miracles, that's got to be myth. When they speak about people meeting gods, that's got to be myth. That's just made up. Because we haven't experienced that. Within the last 200 to 400 years, we have not experienced that, even though there are people who claim they have. Our scientific community will say, no, that's just mythology. That's just made up. And what's interesting is, what if the old myths was the way that those societies wrote down their stories? And those stories were based in their experiences, not made up for the sake of it. Because that seems to be how we approach this. It's made up for the sake of it. The stories about the gods, or the Norse gods, the Aesir, or whoever, the Aesir are the Odin and Thor and Freya, and these gods, and Loki. Those stories are all made up for the sake of it. But what if they're not just made up? What if they have a base in reality? And yes, they might have been construed through the game of telephone, yes, but what if there's base in reality? What if there's actual base? Like the burning bush would make sense if there was a spacecraft that came down and that with the heat of its engines or something, put that bush on fire, and then it spoke to Moses through a loudspeaker. What if that to me, logically, makes more sense than if we think that every human tradition, religion made all this up? In a way, we can look at the same, that goes for dragons, right? Every single religion on our planet that has been depicting life has been depicting dragons. And all the ships in the old Viking age, all of them had a dragon head as on top of their ship. They were called dragon ships because of that, right? The long ships are the dragon ships, dragon boats. And for me, when I look at that and I think, let's look at that. Let's think about, did all people on the earth make up the same mythical creature that all looked like a dragon? Most of them speak of fire spewing through their mouth. Most of them speak that they were flying. Most of them say they liked gold. Did all of them make these up? All across the world, in China, in Africa, South America, North America, the Norse traditions. Did they all just make this up? Or could there be some sort of truth to it that we're not aware of anymore? Whatever that truth might be. Maybe they all died out. Maybe they all shrunk in size. Because if we look at how the the old mammoths were gigantic elephants in the Ice Age, the last Ice Age. And we had saber-toothed tigers. We had rhinoceros that were woolly. And they were much, two or three times bigger than our rhinoceros are today. Well, according to that way of thinking, if we also did have dragons within the last 50,000 years or so, would it be possible that the food supply changed, that and the climate changed, that it got warmer or colder, and that their foods changed, and that their whole species adjusted to a new setting? Because we have a ton of lizards that we call dragons. There are many different dragons out there, but they're not small. What if they used to be bigger? And we still have the Komodo dragon. It can be up to 8 feet long, and it spits out a saliva that'll burn you. So what if these stories about dragons actually have some form of base in reality, but it's a reality that has changed in the last 500, 600, 700 years? So we can look at how mythology, what we in our modern world call just made up stories, most likely have some sort of reality base. And then you can look at the idea of gods coming down from the heavens as an actual, potentially an actual reality, right? We can also look at, science at least, still hasn't figured out the missing link between modern day humans and the humans that were here before that. And one potential solution would be that what we call Neanderthal and those different forms of humans, and then suddenly there showed up this Homo sapiens. What if that was a genetically modified, based in Neanderthal, but also with alien DNA? So suddenly we took a leap in intelligence, a leap in knowingness. And at the same time, we also started invading with fear. Because as we were created on this planet, the forces that created us were differing forces, right? Some were very, very nice and good, but some were actually out there in fear. And in a way, if we were kicked out of Eden, kicked out of paradise, which was an age of innocence, it's an age of just being. And as fear grabs us, this is the apple of knowledge. But it's not gnosis as the God gnosis, it's the knowledge of fear. It's the knowledge of I'm separate from you. I have an identity. I'm not part of the whole. I am separate, isolated. When we look at that, we're getting kicked out of Eden, out of the paradise, and we came onto earth in this warring kind of state. If we look at how much separation and isolation on our planet is doing to separate us and to create more and more strife, more and more problems, and how the Matrix, looking at it from the propaganda of the Matrix, they're trying to create this one world government, right? Where they want to take full control of everything. And on one level, it might look like that's a positive development because we'll have peace, because we'll have we'll all be safe. But that safety and security comes at a very, very, very high price. It comes at the price of us surrendering our own sovereignty. It comes at the price of giving up our individuality. It comes at the price of giving up your true freedom. Because as a child of God, nature, Earth Mother, we all have a right to express our individual freedom, yes. We all have a right to express who we actually are. That's why we're here. And if there's going to be one world order, a new world order, one world government, there will not be any more room for that kind of expression. We won't work in a system. And this system, if we look at how, this is going to be in another video, but we can briefly mention that when you look at the system of fear, the system of the jabs that have been happening to all of humanity, the system of manipulation and control and propaganda, where very, very, very few things are actually based in truth nowadays. Almost nothing that we're being fed is the actual truth of what's happening. It's only being told to us when it can behoove and work for different factions and different fractions or factions and different parts of the powers to be. So when it comes to our being created by extraterrestrial forces, you can also start looking into this, right? Because this is not because I want to sit here and spew out anything that sounds totally crazy, right? I would like it to be somewhat sensible. I would like for you to be looking into this yourself. Either read the old books or look into, like, there's a beautiful documentary called The Chariot of the Gods. And it's from 1970. And then there's been many other documentaries after that. But that one is like one of the groundbreaking documentaries about what it would look like if aliens came down. We're here for an important purpose. This purpose is that we can bring balance to the universe. That our energy, when we are in our highest state, we have an ability to see the light and the dark. We have an ability to sit in love and compassion, as well as whole. When we have an ability to bring that to a table. And for us, we can see that when we're sitting in fear, we are a warmongering species. When we are coming from a defensive inner state, we are terrible in a way, right, to other humans and to our other beings on our planet. We can also see that when we're sitting in our highest space of love, of compassion, of understanding, of tolerance, patience, and we can tap into these spheres, these other realms that are so powerful and so beautiful, and we can create that beauty when we are not sitting in fear. And from that perspective, that is the humankind's reason to be here. But as long as we're not able to sit, as long as most of us have not been in ascension, as long as most of us are not stepping up, our energy is still in a pretty heavy resonance, right? So we are creating more havoc. This is why these videos are coming out now. This is why we can look at the Matrix being very fighting to create more power, to be stronger in itself, to keep all of us in the same boat, keep all of us in the same camp, keep us afraid. This is happening because the Matrix knows that if we ascend, it will lose, right? And the fear of our planet will actually have to go. Because it's sort of like, if you sit in your higher frequency, if you sit in your higher space, fear doesn't have room. Fear doesn't have any room when we move into that space. So, as we ascend, as we start to vibrate higher, we start to recognize, I'm a spiritual being, I'm a sovereign spiritual being. I can partake if I choose to, but I don't have to, right? As you grow into that higher understanding, the resonance that you give out, the spaciousness that you carry within you that also resonates out into our universe, into our quantum field, helps to heal the quantum on our human level, on our earth, but it also helps to heal outwards into space. This is why we're here, I believe. This is why I believe we're going to keep rising. Keep vibrating higher. And one day, we'll be very close to the extraterrestrials again. One day, we'll see them again. But most likely not until we can sit in a high enough vibration. Because quite honestly, if they come down now, we would only see them as invaders. And we'd be throwing bombs. But if we vibrate higher into a state of not seeing everything as an enemy and not leading with fear, that's sort of what happens, right? If you lead with fear, everything you see is a potential target. If you lead with love, everything you see is a potential other love source, a vibrational match. So we approach the situations differently. And until us as humans can vibrate higher on a governmental level, on a total level of like our whole society, if aliens were to come down, we would see them as enemies and we would start a conflict. And if they come down when we have arisen, when we have woken up, we will not see them as enemies. And then the results and the outcome will be very different, right? So these are different timelines that can play out. So, yeah. Hope this made sense to you. There's so much more information in all of this. And I hope for you that you start looking into it yourself, because it's beautiful. It is beautiful. All right, everybody. I'll be back soon for episode 8. And until then, namaste and aho.